She said it over the phone, not even to my face. "Dad, we're selling the property. You don't have a say in this anymore. 38 years I'd worked that land. 38 years of early mornings and frozen pipes and decisions made at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold while I ran numbers in my head. And my daughter called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was driving back from the feed supplier in Barrie, and that's how I found out. I didn't say anything for a moment, just watched the highway stretch out in front of me, the tree line dark against a gray Ontario sky. "Okay," I said. She paused. She'd expected something else. "That's it? Okay?" "I heard you," I said, and I hung up. I'm 64 years old. I've outlived a marriage, a business partner, and 2 dogs I loved more than most people give me credit for. I know when someone has already decided something before they pick up the phone. My daughter hadn't called to discuss. She'd called to inform. There's a difference, and I recognized it the way you recognize the first smell of winter in the air. Not dramatic, just undeniable. Let me go back a little, because the land didn't start with me. My father bought 160 acres outside Collingwood in 1971. Mixed use, some crop rotation, some pasture, a woodlot that backed onto the escarpment. He worked it until his knees gave out, then he handed it to me. No ceremony, no formal papers signed in a lawyer's office. Just a Sunday afternoon, him sitting in the same chair he always sat in, and him saying, "It's yours now. Don't do anything stupid with it." I didn't. For 38 years, I didn't. I leased some of the acreage to a neighboring operation, ran a small sheep flock for most of my 50s, fixed the bank barn twice, and rebuilt the laneway after the floods in 2013. I kept the woodlot. I paid the property taxes every February, without complaint, even the years it was tight. I watched the value climb, and I never thought about cashing out, because that wasn't a number to me. It was the thing that stayed constant while everything else shifted. My wife left in 2009. That's a whole other story, and not the one I'm telling today. What matters is that after she left, it was just me and the property, and the occasional weekend when my daughter drove up from Hamilton with her husband. Her husband. I should say something about him. His name is Trevor, and he is the kind of man who describes himself as an entrepreneur the way other people describe themselves as tall or left-handed. As if it's simply a fact about him, incontestable, requiring no further evidence. He'd had 3 businesses in 7 years when my daughter married him. 2 had closed. The 3rd was a commercial cleaning franchise that did fine, not spectacularly, but fine. Trevor started taking an interest in my land around 2019. He'd drive up and walk the property with his phone out, not looking at the trees or the creek or the way the light came across the south field in the evening, but at apps, real estate apps, zoning maps. He'd mention casually over dinner what the acreage was worth per lot if it were ever subdivided. I let those comments sit where they landed and didn't pick them up. My daughter would watch him and then watch me and not say anything either. Back then, she was still the girl who used to help me mend fence posts on summer mornings. I thought she still understood what this place was. I was wrong about that. Or maybe she changed. Maybe he changed her. I've thought about this a lot since that phone call, and I've decided I don't need to assign blame to understand what happened. In the spring of 2022, my daughter told me she and Trevor wanted to talk to me about the estate plan. I said fine. We sat at the kitchen table, same table my father used to drink his coffee at, and Trevor slid a folder across to me. He'd had a financial planner put together a proposal. The land, he explained, was an underperforming asset. The returns on the lease income relative to the property's market value were, he said, not optimal. If I transferred the property into a family trust now, there could be significant tax advantages, and if the trust were structured correctly, meaning with Trevor and my daughter as co-trustees, the eventual disposition of the asset could be managed more strategically. I read the whole document. Took me about 20 minutes. Trevor looked uncomfortable with the silence. My daughter refilled her coffee twice. When I finished, I closed the folder and put it back on the table. I'll think about it, I said. Trevor smiled. We just want to make sure you're protected, Murray. Murray. He always used my name like that, like he was a salesman and I was a client. I appreciate that, I said. I did not think about it. I called my lawyer the next morning. Her name is Sylvie, and she's been my lawyer since before my daughter was born. I told her about the meeting and the folder. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me a few questions about the wording of the trust structure Trevor had proposed. Then she said, Murray, I want you to come in this week. I went in on Thursday. What Sylvie explained to me over an hour and a half was not complicated, but it was the kind of thing that's easy to miss if you're not looking for it. The trust structure Trevor had proposed would have transferred legal control of the property to him and my daughter jointly, with provisions that made it difficult, not impossible, but deliberately cumbersome, for me to revoke or modify the arrangement. In plain language, once I signed, getting the land back under my own authority would have required going to court. Did you know that when you read it? Sylvie asked. I suspected something, I said. I didn't know the specifics. She nodded. What do you want to do? I already knew what I wanted to do. I'd known since I sat at that kitchen table and watched Trevor smile. I want to restructure the title, I said, before any of this goes further. It took about 4 months. Sylvie walked me through it carefully. What we did was not hidden, not underhanded. It was straightforward estate planning that I simply had not done before, because I'd always assumed the land would stay in the family the way it always had. By understanding, not by document. That assumption had been naive. I fixed it. I placed the property into a trust, but one with different terms. The trustee was not my daughter. It was not Trevor. The trustee was me, with a named successor who was my younger sister's son. My nephew, who is an agricultural lawyer in Guelph, and who actually knew what a woodlot management plan was. The trust included a conservation easement with the Niagara Escarpment Commission. That easement meant the property could not be subdivided or developed without a process so lengthy and expensive that it would, practically speaking, never happen. The land would stay land. I didn't tell my daughter. Not because I was hiding something, but because she hadn't asked me anything. She'd told me, and I decided that I could wait. I waited 2 years. The phone call on the highway in November of last year was apparently the moment she and Trevor had decided to move forward. They'd found a developer, a firm out of Vaughan, that was buying up rural properties north of the city and assembling parcels for residential development. Trevor had been in contact with them. My daughter told me later they'd had preliminary conversations. For 6 months before she called me. 6 months. After I hung up, I pulled into a gas station near Innisfil and sat in the truck for a while. Not from heartbreak. From something quieter than that, the particular stillness that comes when something you prepared for finally arrives. I called Sylvie that evening. They're moving, I said. I heard from your nephew this morning, she replied. Trevor apparently contacted a title search firm, and they'll find the easement within the week, she said. And then they'll find the trust terms. Yes, I said. There was a pause. Are you all right, Murray? I thought about that. The land was outside in the dark. I could hear the sheep in the barn. I'd kept a small flock again the past 2 years, just 12 animals, mostly because I liked the sound of them at night. The woodlot was somewhere out there in the black, the escarpment behind it like a spine. Yes, I said. I'm all right. My daughter called back 3 days later. Her voice was different this time, not the careful, scripted tone of that first call. This was something rawer. Dad, there's a conservation easement on the property. Yes, I said. Since when? 2022. Silence. You did this after our meeting. I did this after I spoke with Sylvie. Yes. Another pause. Longer. Trevor says this makes the property essentially unsellable to a developer. For a residential subdivision. Yes, that's correct, Dad. Her voice tightened. Why didn't you tell us? I sat down in the chair by the window. The one I'd had for 20 years, the one with the worn arm I kept meaning to fix. You didn't ask me what I wanted, I said. You told me what was happening. She was quiet for a moment. Trevor is furious. I imagine he is. He says you've devalued the estate. I looked out the window at the birch trees along the laneway. My father had planted 3 of them in 1974. They were taller than the barn now. The land is worth exactly what it was, I said. What changed is what it can be used for. A developer would have paid. I know what a developer would have paid, I said. I didn't want that. Her breath came out in a long, slow exhale. So that's it? You just decided for all of us? The question landed with some weight. And I'll be honest, I felt it. This is my daughter. I remember her at 4 years old falling asleep in the cab of the truck on the way back from the auction barn. I remember her university graduation and the pride I felt, and the way I struggled to say it out loud because I've never been good at saying those things out loud. The land was supposed to be part of what I left her. You decided for all of us first, I said gently. You just didn't think it counted because you assumed the outcome. She didn't say anything. I'm not angry, I said. I want you to know that. You planned this, she said. It wasn't an accusation exactly. I protected something, I said. There's a difference. She hung up before I could say anything else. My nephew called me that evening. He'd heard from their side. Trevor had apparently consulted a lawyer of his own, looking for some avenue to challenge the trust or the easement. My nephew explained what their lawyer had likely told them. The trust was clean. The easement was registered and compliant with the Escarpment Natural Area designation, and the Conservation Land Tax Incentive Program had already been applied for on the relevant acreage. It was, as he put it, tight. They'd have to prove undue influence or incapacity to get anywhere near this, he said, and they don't have grounds for either. I know, I said. You should expect some pressure, he said. Trevor's the type. He wasn't wrong. Over the following 2 weeks, there were 3 more calls from my daughter, each one a slightly different version of the same conversation. The property was my legacy. I was being irrational. Trevor had only ever been trying to help. Didn't I trust her? In between, there was 1 call from Trevor himself, which I let go to voicemail and did not return. He spoke for 4 minutes about fiduciary responsibility and family partnership. I deleted it. What I noticed during those 2 weeks was that not one of those calls asked how I was. Not one asked what I wanted for the land. Not one mentioned my father, or the barn, or the woodlot, or the sheep. The calls were about the asset. I had become an obstacle to the asset. About 3 weeks after the initial phone call, I got a text from my daughter. Not a call, a text at 11 in the evening. It said, "Trevor and I need to take some time. This isn't what we expected." I read it twice, then set the phone down on the kitchen table. I didn't feel what she might have expected me to feel. I'm 64. I've learned that some silences are not endings. They're just winter. Things go quiet and cold, and then in their own time they don't. I went out to the barn and checked on the sheep. It was a clear night, cold enough that my breath showed. Orion was up over the woodlot, the same sky my father used to look at, the same stars, indifferent and steady. I thought about what I'd actually done, not what Trevor's lawyer called it, not what my daughter thought it meant. What it actually was. I was a man who had known for 3 years that the people around him had stopped seeing him as a person and started seeing him as a variable in a plan, and I had made a quiet, legal, thoroughly documented decision not to be. That was all. Not revenge, not punishment. I had simply refused to disappear on someone else's schedule. The conservation easement meant the woodlot would stay a woodlot. The escarpment behind it would stay, as it had been for 11,000 years. The sheep would graze the south pasture for as long as I could manage them, and after me, the trust would ensure the land passed to stewardship, rather than subdivision. My father had said don't do anything stupid. I don't think he meant don't do anything. I think he meant know what you're doing and why. I knew. 6 weeks after the phone call on the highway, my daughter drove up on a Saturday morning unannounced. Without Trevor, I saw her car come up the laneway, and I stayed at the kitchen table and waited. She came in without knocking. She'd grown up here. She knew she didn't have to. She stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, looking at the room. The table, the window, the old wood stove in the corner that I kept meaning to replace and never did. It smells the same, she said. Coffee's on, I said. She sat down across from me. Not where Trevor usually sat, the other chair, the one she used to sit in as a girl. We didn't talk about the land right away. We talked about her drive up, about the weather, about a cousin's new baby. Small things. The kind of conversation that doesn't mean what it's about. It means, I'm here. After a while, she wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at me. I should have called you differently, she said. That first call. It wasn't right. No, I said, it wasn't. I thought you'd just. She paused. I thought you didn't know what to do with it anymore. I thought you'd be relieved. You didn't ask. I know. She looked down at the mug. Trevor made it sound like we were helping. I let that sit for a moment. I wasn't going to say what I thought about Trevor. She already knew. The land is still yours, I said. After me, through the trust, managed correctly. It's not going anywhere. It's just going to stay what it is. What if I wanted something different, she asked. Not combative, genuinely asking. Then we should have talked about it, I said. Years ago. Before the folder on the table. She nodded slowly. Outside, one of the sheep called from the barn, a cold sound, high and clear. I didn't know you'd set all this up, she said. You didn't ask what I'd been thinking, I said, in any of those years. That landed. I could see it. I'm sorry, Dad. The words were quiet, not dramatic, not followed by anything. Just that. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, the way you can when the other person isn't looking back, when they're staring at their coffee and gathering themselves. She looked like her mother in certain lights. She looked like me in others. I know, I said. We sat there for another hour. We didn't resolve everything. The trust stands. The easement stands. Trevor will manage his feelings about it in whatever way Trevor manages his feelings. None of that changed over coffee. But something else did. In the weeks after that Saturday, things shifted in the small ways that actually matter. She called on a Sunday just to talk. She asked about the sheep by name. She'd known their names once, years ago. And it turned out she still remembered. She drove up one more time in December, and we walked the woodlot together, the ground frozen and the trees bare. And she didn't say anything about value or market or potential. She just walked. I don't know what the future looks like between us. That's honest. We're two people who made assumptions about each other. And assumptions are things you have to undo carefully, one conversation at a time. But I know what the land looks like. It looks the way it always has. The barn a dark shape against the hill, the birch trees along the laneway, the escarpment rising in the west where the woodlot ends and the protected land begins. My father's land. Mine. And someday still the same. Some things should not be optimized. Some things should just be kept. If you've ever had something taken from you quietly, something you built, something you inherited, something that was never supposed to be a transaction, I'd like to hear about it. Where are you watching from tonight? What did you hold on to and how? Leave a comment. I read every one of them.